Now you no longer have to prove that you'll go back to your home country. Now all you need to do is to show that you're a genuine student.
So, when it comes to shifting from one student visa to another student visa, I've heard there are a couple of risks associated with it.
What I want to clarify to our audience is you can't go from a 485 visa to a student visa while inside Australia. So the finance requirement, or colloquially known as the show money requirement, is basically this is the formula. If you go onto your 485 now and you don't get an accounting job as soon as possible, you might really struggle. Welcome to episode 3 of Visa Game Plan. Today our discussion is going to be surrounded about how to change your course to ensure that you can plan for permanent residency effectively. I'm joined by my colleague Amasha. How are you today?
I'm good, Keith. How are you?
Not too bad. Looking forward to chatting about the various course options and how both student visa holders and also other temporary visa holders can study and acquire a skill so that they can plan their permanent residency effectively.
I think to start off with, we need to tell our clients about a story that MJ Legal has encountered. For an example, let's say we got a client who was on their 485, and then we helped that client kind of change the course and then also obtain PR.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's been multiple cases like that we can discuss. But one of the cases that I remember was, now the thing is, you have to understand, when you're guiding a client from student visa all the way to PR, that client stays with you for 2 to 3 years.
Correct.
Right? So you are their partner in migration effectively. So a couple of years ago, a client came to me. She had done a bachelor's of commerce, and she was telling me, "Keith, do you think it's a good idea for me to go out there and look for an accounting job and try to get PR as an accountant?" And at the time, what I told her was, look, if you go onto your 485 now and you don't get an accounting job as soon as possible, you might really struggle, because there was a very difficult period for accountants to get invited for PR. It still is. Or I told her, as an alternative, we can go and study another course instead of going onto your 485. And
That
she was
means like studying a course which would lead to PR after checking
100%.
the skill occupation list.
Yes, definitely. So basically telling the client to acquire a new skill.
Correct.
And she was quite open to it, because even though she had studied commerce, I think in studying it, she realized that was not where her passion lied. So what we did is, instead of putting the client on the 485, because, if you're on a student visa and you go to a 485, you can't then go into any other visa. You have to become a permanent resident or go back home, right?
Correct.
So what we advised that client to do was kind of go into another student visa and do a master's of social work. Now, this was a 2-year course.
So, when it comes to shifting from one student visa to another student visa, I've heard there are a couple of risks associated with it when it comes to the department based on genuineness. How did we deal surrounding those issues with this client?
Definitely. So what I want to clarify to our audience is, you can't go from a 485 visa to a student visa while inside Australia, but you can go from a student visa to another student visa. So basically, what we did was, we told this client to go from a bachelor's to a master's. So when you're making a student visa application, the main criteria is this genuine student criteria. A lot of people have kind of have not realized that they've changed the law. So back in the day, it used to be genuine temporary entrant, which means you have to enter Australia temporarily and then go back once your student visa is finished. Now, that's what you had to convince the department. Now you no longer have to prove that you'll go back to your home country. Now all you need to do is to show that you're a genuine student. So if you're going from a bachelor's to a master's, that suggests academic progression, and that lends itself into being able to argue that you are a genuine student, because you are trying to enhance your educational qualifications.
So, which means there is no downgrade of the qualification going from bachelor's to master's.
There's
Now,
a
let's
progress.
say, yes. So, let's say if a student wants to study a trade course, is that a possibility through a student visa extension, or do they have to study a package course?
Well, let's take the example of somebody studying a Bachelor of Science in Australia, and they believe that it's going to be very hard for them to get a job as a chemist or whatever after they graduate to get a skill assessment. So they come to us and say, "Hey, Keith, why don't we study something else? Can you guide me?" Now, in that situation, I can enroll you into a trade course parallel to your bachelor's, and you won't have any problems, because you're
Right.
still studying your bachelor's.
You still are studying your bachelor's on the visa you came for, so which means it wouldn't really be a problem. But then again, if you run out of your student visa before you complete your trade course, that's when you will have to go for an extension.
Correct. And if you're going for the student visa extension because you also need to still complete your Bachelor's of Science, you're okay. But if you are only extending to complete your
Trade
trade course, that's very risky, right?
That's where the real issue comes.
Yes, because you're downgrading. You came to study a bachelor's, but now you're trying to study a trade course. So there's a couple of strategies, you can do to ensure you preserve your student visa.
So let's say you said once they're on their student visa, they can apply for another student visa for sure, because once you go into a 485, there's nowhere of you applying for a 500 again. So what are the risks associated with it?
Well, the risk associated from going from one student visa to the other student visa is effectively to prove that you're a genuine student. Proving that you're a genuine student has a couple of options, right? Firstly, you have to prove that your course is a natural progression. So going from a bachelor's to a master's or a diploma to a bachelor's, perfect.
It's fine.
Second, you may be required to show finances depending on which country of passport you're on. So the finance requirement, or colloquially known as the show money requirement, is basically, this is the formula. Your first year course fee must be shown in cash, plus you must show $21,000 in living expenses requirement, and then your second year course fee you can show in fixed assets. So that's the equation. So you need to prove that you're having a natural progression of your course, and secondly you need to prove that you have sufficient finances to afford it if you are from a country whose passport requires that.
Right. And this is a different question I'm going to ask you now. I'm quite sure that you get a lot of clients who come on student visas who are studying unrelated courses, which is not on the skill list. And I know that you're like helping them to change their courses, which would lead them to PR. So when it comes to changing the courses, are there any conditions that students need to be aware about?
Well, a couple of things. I think the first thing is, if you're on a student visa, you must have completed 6 months of your principal course before you can change. Let's have a discussion about what a principal course looks like. A principal course is either a bachelor's or a master's. So it's whatever course you came to Australia to study.
Right.
Let's say you came to study a package course, you came to do a certificate 3, certificate 4 in commercial cookery, a diploma of hospitality management,
Advanced
and then a
diploma.
bachelor's of hospitality management. Then your 6 months is from 6 months of doing the bachelor's, not from 6 months of doing your certificate.
I see, okay.
So first thing is you need to finish 6 months of studies. The second thing that you need to do is you need to decide what course you want to change into and whether that course leads to PR. See, a lot of students make this mistake where they just go and change into the cheapest available course or the course that finishes the quickest. But that might not necessarily be in the best interest of your long-term future.
Right, understood. So when it comes to clients that you get who want to change their courses to courses that would lead to PR, how do MJ Legal kind of cater those clients? What is our whole process, and how does the team work towards getting that client enrolled into that particular course?
Yeah, so we first start from looking at the data. So the government publishes all the occupations that it invites for the 189 rounds. When you look at each of the state governments, we know which occupations or which sectors are in the priority, because the state governments have their own lists or they tell you what are their priority sectors. We look at the expression of interest data to see how many other skilled migrants are currently waiting for PR in certain occupations. And then we build out a list of courses that we think A is cost effective and B also helps you get a skill assessment pretty easily. Then we give you about 3 to 4 options, and depending on your career aspirations, we will help you enroll into that course.
I think that's a lot of information, and then I think MJ Legal puts a lot of effort into identifying the data and then giving the client the best solution in that regard. I think that information was very helpful for all our student visa holders who are not even studying the courses that will lead to PR. Thank you very much, Keith. That was very helpful.
Thank you, Masha.
That's it for episode 3 of Visa Game Plan. Hoping to see you guys in another episode.